Hello, it's Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot, and today I wanted to share with you how I go about my journaling process. I do get a lot of questions about this, so I thought it might be helpful to just put a video together to show you my process and how I go about it. So journaling for me is as much a creative expression as it is a form of record keeping. Every page offers an opportunity to bring a splash of color, a bit of texture, and a beautiful message to my day. It reminds me to slow down, especially on those days when I'm rushing through life. It's a meditative experience that helps me to connect with the present moment and really listen to the messages I'm receiving. My journals are a place where I come to connect to my inner voice, to express myself creatively, and to appreciate the little moments that we so often take for granted. These are the journals you see here on my channel, the ones that have been thoughtfully created, are artistically expressive, and appear to be precisely executed. But not all my journals look like these, and the books you see here quite often don't start out that way. There is, underneath the creative flow, a process, a formula of sorts that you can follow, but it is also an intuitive experience, guided as much by feeling as function. So while in this video I'm happy to share with you that underlying process, I want to encourage you to also follow your own creative nudges, to not get hung up on how things are supposed to be and let things naturally unfold as they should be. That was one of the hardest lessons I had to learn when I began creative journaling last year. My journals don't have to fit anyone else's ideas. They only have to express my own. So while I encourage you to use this video as a springboard for your creative journaling process, I also encourage you to go out there and do your very own thing. So with that thought, let's talk about how I actually go about the process of journaling. I begin my journal setup with my monthly pages. I create my calendar, which lists any important dates, along with the moon phases. I include here a space for my new moon intention, which actually gets filled in on the appropriate day, so I would leave this space blank. I also like to include my card of the month, which is pulled from my Your Ahead spread. So for May, my card was the Ace of Cups. So I printed out a picture of my monthly card and just wrote card of the month in here. Sometimes I add in a little bit more information about my card of the month, which I believe I did in April. So I just put in a little note about my card of the month in April. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It's a kind of fluid and organic process. I like to also create a space to note my decks. And this I just leave blank at the start of the month and just add decks as I use them. Here you can see back in April, these were some of the decks that I used in April. So that just allows me to keep track of my decks every month. So all of this gets set up at the beginning of the month. So I do my little decorative things. It's always a 2-page spread. I always have my calendar, my moon phases. I have my new moon intention, a list of decks, usually my card of the month. And then I leave a blank space for my reflections, which I come back and fill in later at the end of the month. But this is my monthly setup that I do month after month. So the next thing I do on the first of the month, after I have created my monthly spread, is that I include a spread for any Sabbats, holidays, or special occasions that I might want to include for the month. So as with my monthly spread, my Sabbat spreads all follow a similar layout. I write the name, the date. I have usually print out this little collage of related images. I usually make a little note. I note about the season. I include a ritual, and I print off a copy of the spread that I will be doing. All of this gets done ahead of time. This gets actually done, my spread gets done on the day of the event, which this happened to be on May 1st. So it gets done on the day of the event, but everything else is created ahead of time. Every month I also include a new and full moon reading in my tarot journal, and I usually use Ethany's Tarot by the Moon spread. So you can download that. It's a free PDF from her website, and I will link it below. So I just print these sheets off. This is out of her PDF. I just print these off and I fold them in half, and this is at the beginning of the month. And I just tuck them into, my journal somewhere here in the back. And then on those days, I will pull these pages out to refer to, and I will go ahead and do my moon reading. So that gets sort of planned ahead of time because the printouts are already in my journal ready to go, and I have the ones for the corresponding new and full moon for that month. So that is pretty much the extent of my monthly setup, how I set this journal up every month. I just create my month spread at the beginning of the month, and I create my Sabbath, holiday, special occasion, whatever you might want to include, is all set up at the beginning of the month. And then after that, I just leave the pages blank because that's where I will include my weekly stuff. So speaking of weekly, let's take a look at what I do every week. So every week has a dedicated spread in my journal for my daily card pulls. Every Monday, I choose 2 decks, 1 tarot, 1 oracle, that I will use for my daily draws that week. So usually I will go ahead on Monday and pull my cards for the day before I've written anything in here. I will take a picture of my cards and then print them and add them to my journal. And these are usually the cards that end up kind of creating the energy or the vibe or the design of the page for the week. I create a basic layout for the pages. So usually to start with, it's usually just a picture and a notation of my decks that I'll be using. So this is just, so this was my card that I pulled from Monday. This is the Condor. And all I added was this card and this little banner at the top and a notation of the decks I was using. And that was it. That was all I did for Monday. Then I included my daily draw for the day, which I just note the date, the tarot card that I pulled, along with a little note, reflection, message, whatever comes to mind. And then I had my oracle, and again, whatever note, message comes to mind. Sometimes this is directly out of an oracle guidebook. Sometimes it's whatever I get intuitively off a card. And then the process just is repeated day after day, Monday through Friday. I just pull my 2 cards. I just pull my 2 cards and I record them into my journal. I only do daily draws Monday through Friday, and then at the end of the week I do my weekly reflection. Any other tidbits or designs or additions, embellishments generally get added either on Friday after I've written my weekly review or my weekly reflections, or a lot of times just as I go throughout the week. So when I hit Tuesday, I knew that there wasn't enough room to write Wednesday down here, so after I did my daily draw on Tuesday, I just added some washi tape. And here was all my readings, and I got to, I pulled the Hermit on Friday, and I thought, oh, that's a pretty card, so I'm going to go ahead and put that down here, and I printed it off, added this little scrap of paper here to tie in with this one, and then I wrote my reading and then added my reflection later on that evening, I believe. So now it's important to note that these pages generally start off pretty basic. They evolve as I add little touches here and there throughout the week. So the initial setup is really just an image and a notation about the decks that I'll be using. The layout pretty much stays the same week after week, and that allows me to really streamline the process. Throughout the month, I also include any other readings that I might do. So generally these are things like the new and full moon readings, special occasion readings, check-in readings, and sometimes deck-related readings. Just whatever I feel called to do throughout the month. So the process pretty much remains the same month after month and week after week. And that's what allows me to make this process manageable. So every Sunday, I switch to my self-care journal and I do my spreads in there. Some months, if I have a lot of time, on the first Sunday of the month, I will go ahead and do a basic layout of all the pages for the month in advance. So that means I basically go ahead and I create the dates and I add the embellishments. So when I set these up, I have just the date and whatever embellishments I am including on the page. Now, since I write my self-care Sunday spreads a month in advance, because you can also find them on my Instagram, I do go ahead and note the prompts, and then I just fill those in as the days come around. So this allows me to spend time every Sunday really focusing on the reading rather than spending a lot of time doing this scrapbooking. But if I don't have time to do them all at once on the first Sunday of the month, then I just do them on the Sundays as the Sunday comes and as I have time. Sometimes I'll go in on a Tuesday and add in the rest of the readings the rest of the prompts for the month and create the pages. Then I basically just do a page for every Sunday. And that allows me to keep these separate so that I can come back and reflect on those whenever I feel the need to reconnect with those readings. So basically that's how my main tarot journaling goes every month. I set up what I can ahead of time, and then I just go week by week and add in what I need to. I do want to show you a couple of other journals that I worked on throughout the month, but first I wanted to talk about some key points and tips that I've discovered along the way, as well as answer some of the questions that I get asked pretty frequently. So the best piece of advice I have for journaling is to let what other people do in their journals inspire you, but don't feel like you have to emulate their work. Your journal is an expression of your practice, so it should reflect you and what is important in your life. So if, for example, doing one of the Sabbath readings isn't important to your practice, then don't include them. Include what makes sense for you and resonates with what you want to record and remember. If you're looking to set up your own journal from scratch, similar to this one, you might want to check out my video on hitting the reset button on my 2019 journal. I show you in pretty good detail how I planned out and set up this tarot journal, and I will link that in the description box below. The other thing to keep in mind is that repetition can be your friend. If you maintain the same basic layout for your key items in your journal, such as your monthly calendar and your daily draw pages, that will really help you to streamline the process. The more often you lay out pages in the same format, the quicker you get at doing it because you know what goes where. You're not sitting here staring at a blank page wondering what to put in. But for those in-the-moment readings, those on-the-fly readings, don't be afraid to let the cards or your inner creative spirit guide the process. Not every page has to follow a formula. You can have a variety of layouts and designs in your journal. It doesn't all have to match. I think the main question I get asked most about my journals is how do I find the time to actually journal? I've kind of touched on that already about how I make that work for me, but the big key things are setting things up monthly and using the same basic layout week after week for my card pulls. Because I'm following a process, it doesn't take me long to journal on a daily basis unless I choose for it to. Again, repetition is the key to streamlining your journal process. For me, I pull cards in the morning after everyone has left for the day. I sit down with my coffee, I pull out my cards, and I note them in my journal. Mondays take a bit longer because I'm setting up for the week, but even then, it really just takes me a few minutes because, again, I'm following the same process week after week. The biggest secret, if there really is one, is that my journals don't always start out this way. I have a tendency to do my readings and just jot them down on notebook paper in this messy format, and I snap a picture of my cards. A lot of times I'll just tear this out and I'll just slip it into my journal, and I'll come back and print out the picture and transfer what I wrote into my journal later on. So don't feel like you have to sit down and have this really in-depth, lengthy creative process every time you do a reading. You can note it down on whatever you have laying around and then add it to your journal when you have time. And it's just as important to remember that your journal doesn't have to look like mine. It can be as simple or as elaborate as you want it to be. These journals I look at more as keepsakes. They are in a way like sacred space. I create them with the intention to preserve my reflections and as a way of honoring my practice. They are like tarot and meditation all in one, and it's just the way that I express my personal practice. So now that we've talked a little bit about how I go about my basic tarot journals, I'll show you two other types of tarot related journals that I keep throughout the month. So another journal that I keep throughout the month is my deck study journal. And this is a journal, it changes every month because I use a different journal for every deck. This particular one is for my Moonchild. So I've been doing my deep dive study into the Moonchild, and this journal is a reflection of that work. And I'll show you this journal in more detail when I talk about how I actually study my decks, and that's another video coming soon, so keep an eye out for that one if you are interested. So that is my deck study journal. Again, it changes every month. I have a different journal for every deck that I study. This one just happens to be my Moonchild and the one that I was working on in actually April and May because it took me 2 months to study that deck. The other journal that I actually just started in May is my Goddess journal. And this is a journal where I am just working on getting to know some of the goddesses, learning about their story, their myths, and then also, of course, doing some readings with these goddesses. So that is a part of my goddess study as well as my tarot reading. So that's another journal that I've been working on. Just for fun, I also want to show you that this is also what some of my journals look like. This was my Nicoletta study before I put it into my junk journal. And this one I will show you, which it's like so big I can't even get it all on the table, and I'm going to end up moving everything. But this I want to show you, this is my main tarot journal. So it does not have to always be pretty. Like, it can be just stuff stuck everywhere and just pages written wherever. And like, do you see this mess? This is my main tarot journal. So just so you keep in mind that your journals don't always have to be beautiful works of art. They can be just strictly functional. And I mean, look at this big beefy thing. Can you see it? I can't even get it on camera. It's so huge. But this is my main study journal for tarot in general. And it's not pretty, it's big and it's bulky, but it has all the information I need in it. So I just wanted to show you that as well, just so that you can see that they don't have to be fantastic, you know, works of art or these really fancy fancy journals. I do like to keep these particular journals. I like to scrapbook in them. I like to make them pretty. And then, like I said, it's a part of my practice. It's a meditative process. It's a part of my tarot practice. It's a part of my journaling. And I really enjoy just the process of bringing all of this together week after week. And it makes a wonderful record of my practice that I can go back and, you know, reflect on later on. And my deck study journals are just a wonderful way for me to creatively connect with my tarot decks. Again, I have another video about that coming out soon. And then, of course, my new goddess journal. And if you want to see that in more detail, check out my May journal pages, and you'll be able to see that as well as all the pages that I did do for May in my my daily tarot journal. So thank you so much for joining me for this look at how I journal. I hope that you found this information helpful, and if you have any questions for me, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I wish you the best of luck with your tarot journaling journey, and I look forward to seeing you again soon for more creative tarot for an inspired life.